The room is quiet, but the silence is not peace. It's a silence that presses against your chest, invisible and heavy, like standing at the bottom of a drained ocean. You feel the weight of your own existence, not in some poetic romantic sense, but as a dull, constant ache. Every morning is a negotiation with yourself. Should I get up? Does it matter? Is there a reason beyond routine? The clock ticks forward like a ritual. You brush your teeth. You scroll past 100 filtered lives. You smile at people when they speak to you, even though your internal monologue whispers, "This is all absurd." You used to feel sad, at least that was something. Now, you feel nothing. A still, gray fog. Not quite despair. Not quite hope. And somewhere, buried in the quiet violence of your own thoughts, a deeper question flickers. Why do I feel like I don't belong in the world I'm expected to live in? Most people who suffer silently aren't drowning in chaos, they're suffocating in meaninglessness. Not because life is objectively void of value, but because they've been told all their lives that the meaning already exists. That there's a correct path, a predefined role, a singular narrative you must play out. And when your soul doesn't align with that script, the world starts to feel hostile. You start to feel defective. This is the kind of internal erosion that no prescription can fully mend. It's not simply a chemical imbalance, it's an existential one. There is a wordless shame in feeling this way. Because you're not starving. You're not dying of thirst. You have a roof, a job, maybe even a few people who love you. And yet, something inside you whispers, you are not living your life. You are performing it. That whisper is existential despair. And contrary to popular belief, it's not a disorder, it's a signal. A philosophical one. But no one ever teaches you how to read it. They hand you habits, hacks, and affirmations. They say, just think positive, or find your purpose, as if meaning were a buried object, waiting in the right self-help book or YouTube short. They tell you to climb the ladder, but no one ever asks whether the ladder is leaning against the wrong wall. The depression you feel may not be a malfunction. It might be your most honest reaction to a life you were never meant to live. And here, precisely here, is where Jean-Paul Sartre's voice enters the silence like a rupture. Not to console, but to confront. Sartre didn't believe life had meaning by default. And he didn't think that was tragic, he thought that was liberation. Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself, he wrote. To many, that sounds terrifying. To someone drowning in despair, it might be the only rope. Because what if your depression isn't just a chemical prison, but a spiritual awakening to the unbearable weight of freedom? What if your pain comes not from lack, but from the realization that you are the one who must decide why you exist? What if that unbearable gray fog is not a curse, but the raw, unfiltered condition of your freedom before you've chosen how to shape it? These are not comforting thoughts. Sartre never meant them to be. But they are true. And in a world awash in artificial optimism, truth, raw and unsettling, can be the most healing medicine. You may be tempted to look away here, to return to scrolling, medicating, or numbing. But stay. Because this is not the end of the tunnel, it's the first glimpse of the real exit. Your suffering may be the door, not the disease. Your emptiness may not be failure, but space. And that leads us to the great, unspoken question beneath all of this. If life has no meaning, what now? What do you do when there is no cosmic blueprint, no divine script, no external validation waiting to be unlocked? How do you live when existence is not a gift to be unwrapped, but a burden to be shaped? How do you choose to rise when nothingness is the default? In the next section, we will descend deeper into the roots of this despair, into the psychological traps and cultural myths that bind you, and into the existential framework Sartre built not to destroy hope, but to awaken you to a more radical form of it, the kind that doesn't require permission. Depression often presents itself as a private affliction. You assume it's about you, your past, your flaws, your failures. But what if the real problem isn't you? What if it's the worldview you've unconsciously inherited? A worldview that promises clarity, direction, and fulfillment, while secretly conditioning you to deny your deepest truths. From childhood, you were handed a narrative. Be good. Work hard. Follow the rules. Get the grades, the job, the relationship. Acquire status. Contribute. And somewhere in this curated script, meaning will reveal itself, quietly, inevitably, as if it were the natural reward for obedience. But what if it never does? What if that script was never yours to begin with? This is where Sartre begins, not with the despair of a broken individual, but with the illusion of a designed existence. He called it bad faith, the lie we tell ourselves when we try to become what society wants us to be instead of who we actually are. It's not just a lie, it's a betrayal of your freedom, a betrayal of your responsibility, and, worst of all, a betrayal of your power. You weren't born to follow a blueprint. Sartre would say there is no blueprint. Existence precedes essence. You exist first, and only then do you define what you are, not the other way around. But this is deeply uncomfortable, because if there's no built-in essence, no cosmic job description, then everything is up to you. Your purpose, your identity, your values, your meaning. And in a culture built on templates, roles, and pre-packaged dreams, that kind of responsibility feels like vertigo. No wonder people crumble under it. We are creatures wired to avoid uncertainty. Psychologist Ernest Becker described it as the denial of death, our lifelong obsession with illusions of permanence. And what's more permanent than an externally given meaning? A destiny you don't have to choose, only accept. A story where you know your role, where you feel safe. Sartre would tell you, that's not failure. That's the raw material of consciousness. He believed that depression, in many cases, is not a malfunction, but an awakening. When the old scripts stop working, when the roles feel hollow, when all the shoulds lose their grip, that's when the truth begins to surface. And the truth is this: you are free. Not in the political sense, not in the Instagram aesthetic sense, but in the most terrifying and beautiful way imaginable. Free to choose, free to define, free to create. And this is not a gift, it's a burden. Because now, the responsibility is yours. No gods, no fate, no map, just your raw, unfiltered presence and the decisions you make with it. But how can this help with depression? Psychologist Rollo May, who integrated existentialism into psychotherapy, observed that most neuroses stem from a fear of being nothing. This isn't just metaphor. It's ontological terror, the dread that underlies the question, what if my life doesn't matter? But Sartre flips the script. He doesn't deny that abyss. He embraces it. Because only from that abyss can real authenticity emerge. Only in the face of nothingness can we begin to choose freely, not reactively. Not to fit a mold, but to become. Contrast this with Carl Jung's idea of individuation, the process of integrating the unconscious, of becoming your truest self. For Jung, the shadow, those rejected parts of the self, is the gatekeeper to transformation. Depression, then, is the psyche's refusal to keep playing pretend. A spiritual protest against a false identity. Sartre would agree, you can't be yourself until you stop lying to yourself. You lie when you say, I have to do this. You lie when you say, I can't help who I am. You lie when you say, I have no choice. These are the chains of bad faith, and they're forged in passivity. The truth. You always have a choice. Even in despair. Especially in despair. Because when everything else is stripped away, when the expectations, the roles, the rewards lose meaning, you finally arrive at what is yours to create. And yes, it hurts. Of course it does. Meaning made by force is never soft. It burns away what's false before it can give birth to what's true. Depression, through this lens, is not a pathology but a crossroads. It's the place where the borrowed life disintegrates, and something unshaped, something terrifying and sacred, begins to stir. But most people turn back. They numb, distract, cope. because the responsibility of freedom feels too large, too unstable. You don't have to turn back. You don't have to fear the collapse of the old structure, because that collapse is your beginning. In the next section, we will explore the hidden consequences of not facing this truth. How the refusal to engage your existential freedom manifests in every corner of modern life. How society keeps you comfortable, numb, and obedient to illusions. And how escaping that trap is not just possible, but necessary. Because the cost of ignoring this truth is not just depression. It's forgetting you were ever alive at all. You may believe you're alone in this fog, that your emptiness is a private failure, a defect in brain chemistry, a secret you must carry without burdening others. But look closer. Listen longer. Everyone's eyes are tired, not from sleeplessness, but from pretending. We are living in what Aldous Huxley once feared, a culture so saturated with distractions, comfort, and shallow pleasures that no one needs to be controlled. We willingly surrender our depth in exchange for stimulation. We don't rebel because we're too busy scrolling. And beneath this surface-level engagement, something ancient is dying. The relationship with our own freedom. What happens when millions of people go through life numbed by convenience, distracted by entertainment, and sedated by routine? When the architecture of society is designed not to awaken you, but to keep you comfortably asleep, the answer is what you see around you. An epidemic of quiet desperation. Depression becomes normalized. Anxiety becomes a personality trait. Attention spans fracture. People talk in dopamine loops, not sentences. We replace intimacy with content, curiosity with outrage, silence with algorithms. And worst of all, we start to forget that anything is missing. This is the unseen consequence of denying your existential condition. It's not just about feeling low. It's about losing touch with the very capacity to feel meaning at all. Jean-Paul Sartre warned that if you do not claim your freedom, someone else will write your story for you, and worse, they'll make you believe it was yours all along. That's the real horror of bad faith. Not that you're being controlled, but that you become the agent of your own control. You repeat mantras you never questioned. Just be realistic. Follow your passion. Success equals happiness. Everything happens for a reason. But these aren't truths, they're scripts. And the moment they fail you, when your life collapses under their weight, you're told the fault is yours. So you internalize it. You say, I'm broken, instead of, the system is false. You say, I'm not trying hard enough, instead of, this dream isn't mine. You say, I need to fix myself, instead of, maybe I need to burn this whole thing down. And that is exactly what the culture wants. Your quiet compliance. Your self-blame. Your isolation. Because if everyone believed what Sartre believed, that life has no pre-made meaning, and that each individual must create it with radical freedom and terrifying responsibility, the entire structure would crumble. Think about it. If meaning isn't inherited but created, then money, fame, status, even morality, none of it is sacred. It's all provisional. It's all subject to your choice. That kind of freedom doesn't produce obedient workers or loyal consumers. It produces chaos or revolution. So instead, you're sold sedation. You're taught to seek comfort over truth, validation over authenticity, escapism over introspection. This is why you feel paralyzed, not because you're weak, but because you're being torn in two directions. The world wants your obedience. Your soul wants your liberation. And depression. It's what happens when you've stayed obedient too long. It's not just emotional pain, it's existential suppression. You were never meant to live a pre-written script. You were never meant to outsource your values, your identity, your desire. But when you do, when you betray that inner voice day after day, the result is not just sadness. It's spiritual collapse. Sartre understood this better than most. In his view, depression was often the consequence of refusing to confront one's radical freedom. Not because freedom is easy, but because it demands that you accept life as a blank page, not a finished book. And that blankness terrifies people. So they fill it with distractions. They chase relationships to avoid loneliness. They chase success to avoid insignificance. They chase pleasure to avoid silence. But the silence always returns. It waits patiently beneath the noise. Because that silence is you. You are not your achievements. You are not your trauma. You are not even your pain. You are the conscious presence behind it all, the one who decides what any of it means. And when you refuse that role, when you live as if you are not the author but merely a character, the psychological cost accumulates quietly. First as numbness, then as anxiety, then as despair. This is the trajectory of the unexamined life in a hyper-stimulated world. And it's happening everywhere. People are turning into spectators of their own existence. They outsource decisions to algorithms, ethics to politics, self-worth to likes and numbers. They live reactively, chasing trends, mimicking ideologies, copying lifestyles, without ever asking, who am I beneath all of this? Because the moment they ask that, the illusion cracks. But what if depression is not a hole, but a tunnel? What if you are not falling, but descending? Not breaking, but shedding? And what if the darkness is not your enemy, but the womb of your becoming? In the next section, we walk into that darkness fully. Not to escape it, but to rebel inside it. To confront the lie that you are powerless. To reclaim your agency in a world that profits from your passivity. Because rebellion, Sartre believed, is not about violence. It's about choosing. And when you choose for the first time, not what's expected, not what's comfortable, but what's true, that's when freedom begins. But that crack is everything. That crack is the beginning of authenticity. It's where Sartre believed the truth first enters, not as light, but as fracture. Because before you can create yourself, you must first destroy what you were told to be. And that destruction is lonely. It is terrifying. It is often called depression. You've been taught that rebellion looks like chaos, burning flags, loud protests, radical slogans. But Sartre's rebellion is silent, internal, invisible. It begins the moment you say, no more pretending. No more pretending to want what you don't want. No more pretending to believe what you've never questioned. No more pretending that this version of life, the one handed to you, sold to you, enforced through praise and punishment, is enough. Because it's not. And it never was. This is the moment your real life begins. Not when you fix yourself. Not when you find the right medication. Not when your job or relationship or status finally clicks. But when you stop waiting for life to give you permission. This rebellion doesn't require a manifesto. It begins the moment you reclaim the most dangerous truth in the modern world. You are free. Not metaphorically. Not hypothetically. Existentially. Sartre called it radical freedom. The truth that every moment offers you a choice, even in suffering, even in despair. But most people avoid this truth. Because freedom means responsibility. It means you can't blame your past forever. You can't blame your parents, your culture, or even your depression. It means the story you're living is the story you're choosing, even if that choice is to keep following what kills you. But if you can accept that responsibility, something shifts. The question is no longer, why am I like this? It becomes, what do I want to do now, knowing that I am? That's where freedom begins, not in the absence of pain, but in your response to it. Not in finding meaning, but in creating it. This is the rebellion Sartre calls you toward, not against society, but against passivity. Against the false belief that you are an object, a product of causes, a victim of circumstance. You are not an object. You are a subject, a creator, and your life is your work of art. So what do? You start by burning the script. The one that tells you what success looks like. The one that tells you who you're supposed to be. The one that rewards you for staying small and afraid. You stop asking, what should I do? And start asking, what must I become to feel alive again? And you get uncomfortable. Because rebellion is not comfort. It is not ease. It is the willingness to walk into the void of not knowing, with open eyes and no guarantees. That's what Sartre meant when he said, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself." He didn't mean this as a motivational quote. He meant it as a warning. There is no divine plan, no hidden map, no cosmic applause. There is only this moment, and what you dare to make of it. So you choose, consciously, recklessly, truthfully. You choose what matters. You choose how to suffer. You choose who to be. And that choice isn't made once, it's made daily, in every small act of courage. When you speak what's real instead of what's expected. When you stop numbing yourself just to get through the day. When you take one step away from the lie, even if it leads to uncertainty. That is rebellion. And it doesn't always feel like fire. Sometimes it feels like grief. Like leaving behind the roles that kept you safe. Like sitting alone without reaching for a screen. Like confronting your emptiness without asking it to vanish. But slowly, through that silence, something new begins to rise. Not joy, yet. Not peace, yet. But something deeper. Authenticity. And authenticity is the only place where healing begins. Because you can't heal a lie. You can only heal what is true. And if your depression is rooted in self-betrayal, in performing someone else's life, it's not you that's broken. It's the performance. Let the mask fall. Let the scripts burn. Let the false self dissolve. And from the ashes, write a new sentence, one that is yours. Even if it's rough. Even if it's uncertain. Even if it begins with, "I don't know who I am, but I'm finally ready to find out." That is courage. That is philosophy, lived. Remember, Sartre didn't write in order to inspire. He wrote to provoke. He wanted you to feel the weight of your existence, not to crush you, but to awaken you. To show you that every excuse is a prison, and every truth is a key. So take the key. Unlock your days from the scripts. Free your mind from the borrowed definitions. Reclaim your sorrow, your silence, your sacred confusion. You don't need a plan. You need presence. You don't need a savior. You need sincerity. You don't need to know the ending. You just need to take the next honest step. Because freedom isn't a final destination. It's a practice. And rebellion. It's not a revolution outside you. It's the quiet, daily act of saying, "I will no longer live as if I don't matter. I will no longer accept a life that deadens me. I am willing to begin again, without guarantees, without permission, without perfection." In the next and final section, we will walk to the edge of this truth, where philosophy becomes transformation. We will uncover the most powerful realization that Sartre offers, that even in the heart of despair, you are the meaning you've been waiting for. Not because life is easy, but because it is yours. There comes a moment when the storm quiets, not because the chaos has gone, but because something inside you has changed. The questions that used to scream, "Who am I? What's the point? Why does it hurt so much?" don't vanish. They remain, but they no longer control you. Because you've stopped demanding answers, and instead, you've become willing to live the questions. This is the turning point Sartre was guiding you toward all along. Not a philosophical insight to memorize, not a lifestyle hack to optimize suffering, but a complete existential transformation. The realization that life has no inherent meaning is not a curse. It is your liberation. It's terrifying at first. Sartre knew this. He called it anguish, that dizzying confrontation with the raw freedom of your existence. That moment when all external meaning collapses, and you're left staring into the void, realizing there is no map, no guiding hand, no cosmic script. But here's the deeper truth. The void is not empty. It's fertile. From it, you can create anything. Not in a shallow, motivational way. Not in the sense of building some aesthetic lifestyle or constructing a new ego. But in the deeper sense, of becoming the ground on which your meaning stands. Because you are not here to find meaning. You are here to forge it. Not in a shallow, motivational way. Not in the sense of building some aesthetic lifestyle or constructing a new ego. But in the deeper sense of becoming the ground on which your meaning stands. Because you are not here to find meaning. You are here to forge it. Your pain. It's not proof of failure. It's proof you are awake. Your depression. Not an illness to erase, but a call to return to yourself. Your emptiness. Not a void to be filled, but a space in which your truth can finally echo. And that truth is simple, devastating, and liberating all at once. You are the author. There is no one coming to rescue you. But no one can take that pen from your hand, either. Because choosing yourself means letting die everything that is not you. The expectations, the roles, the stories. You will lose people. You will lose approval. You may even lose the old version of yourself. But in that death is the beginning of real life. Sartre's ultimate message wasn't despair, it was defiance. He looked into the abyss and didn't flinch. You get to decide what matters. You get to decide what you live for. You get to say, this is who I am, not because it was given to me, but because I gave it to myself. And this choice, this terrifying, magnificent, solitary choice, is the birth of authentic existence. It doesn't come with applause. It doesn't come with certainty. It often comes with grief. He saw that the universe is silent, that no grand plan waits for you, and he said, good, because in that silence, he heard freedom. And in that freedom, he saw the chance to become something no system, no God, no culture could define. A human being who chooses, not reacts, not obeys, not conforms, chooses, with full awareness of the cost, the responsibility, the solitude, and chooses anyway. So what does this mean for you? It means your depression doesn't have to be the end of your story. It might, in fact, be the beginning, the moment you stopped being able to live falsely, the moment your soul refused to keep playing the part. It means you don't need to be fixed. You need to be honest. It means the world may not give you meaning, but you can give meaning to the world, through how you live, how you love, how you suffer, how you rise. And it means this. You are free, you are terrified, and you are enough. Not because of what you achieve, not because of how you heal, but because you exist. And existence itself is the miracle. Sartre once said, existence precedes essence. He meant, you were not born with a purpose. You were not created to fulfill a pre-written destiny. You simply are. And from this blank canvas of your being, you have the power to shape, to choose, to become. That is your dignity. That is your rebellion. That is your salvation. And perhaps the greatest paradox of all is this. When you finally stop looking for meaning out there, you begin to embody it in here. So let this be your moment. Not of resolution, but of reclamation. Not of perfection, but of presence. You don't need to have it all figured out. You only need to wake up, to stop pretending, to look the void in the eye and whisper, I choose to exist, and I choose what that means. In your silence, in your decisions, in your daily rebellion against passivity, every small act of integrity becomes sacred. Every refusal to betray yourself becomes holy. Every step into the unknown becomes a hymn to your freedom. And even in your sorrow, even in your darkness, there is light. Not the light that blinds, but the kind that guides. A quiet flame inside you that says, keep going. This pain matters. This truth is real. This is the life you are meant to create. And when you say that, really say it, you are no longer depressed in the way you once were. Because you are no longer waiting. You are becoming. And in this becoming, you may find the first real glimpse of peace. Not the peace of answers, but the peace of authorship. The storm will still rage. The questions will still haunt you. But you will walk through it all with your head lifted, your spine straight, and your soul intact. Because you have embraced what few ever dare to, the freedom to be human. In all its terror, in all its beauty, in all its truth. And that is everything.